Here we have William Hawkins again. This was in 1982, so a little bit before the time of this painting that we're looking at together. He lived to be to about 95 years old, and he was someone who was drawing and was engaged with art from a young age. He was born in Kentucky, worked on his family's farm, and he was particularly good at hunting and trapping and working with horses. Uh, Him and his brother would break and train the horses on the farm. One of the activities that he would do on the farm would be to draw all the different types of animals that he would encounter during his time there. And his affection for depicting animals continued, so if research William Hawkins, you'll see that a large part of his work were different animals, and I'll show you an example of that. Sometimes they would be imagined or sort of popular culture animals or creatures. He was quite a character in the neighborhood. He had this car that he painted, like he painted the interior. He made sculptural elements to it. So when he would go to the store, people would know who he was and, really want to know what he was about. He grew up in Kentucky, born in 1895, then moved to Columbus, Ohio, and this is where this picture was taken in 1916. And he was still quite young then. When he moved to Columbus, he had to adapt to city life. He was a jack of all trades. He had to do any type of labor that he would come across. He did some military service. He, I believe, owned a flop house at some point. So he had this like really varied and very full life. And the entire time he was still engaged with art, and he was actually even selling some of his art. But it really wasn't until in the late 70s, around early 80s, when he was starting to get noticed. He was a self-taught artist, and he talks a lot about how he was born to be an artist. The only person who could make art like him was him. And he was very much someone who believed in the work that he made. He wanted the work to be bought, and he knew what his audience wanted. One of the interesting details about his life is that about 70% of the work that he created was these big monumental buildings or statues, such as the Statue of Liberty, because the people who would buy his work were really curious and interested in owning that type of work from him. So, he was very tuned in with his market, and he wanted it to be bought. And once it was out the door and it was bought, he moved on. And, not every artist, thinks about their art that way, but Hawkins definitely did. As I was mentioning all these details about his process, about his life, are there any questions or sort of new thoughts that come to mind, as we return to this work? He definitely uses words in his paintings, and it's often to shine a light on that symbol. And also, if you notice at the bottom in a lot of his paintings, he, especially, the ones he did later on in his career, he put William L. Hawkins and his birthday, and that he was born in Kentucky. So he, used words to tell us, like, this is important, right? Like, I'm the artist, this is when I was born. So I'm inclined to believe that the symbolism is very intentional. You have this big cityscape in the back, right? You have, New York City is like one of the quintessential American cities. And then in the foreground, you also have a different type of style of house. And the ones in the front, and to be honest, I don't know if he was thinking this, but New York was a Dutch colony, so I wonder if, those are perhaps Dutch houses, right? And if you have ever gone to the Brooklyn Museum, there are some of those Dutch houses, like in their entirety, in the galleries.
Living. When I get up every morning, I look out there and I see that pretty sun. I say, "Oh Lord, I'm living another day." Thank you, Jesus. I go out there and look up at the sky. There and look at my window. Look at them big, pretty trees out there. That's the kind of man I am. I'm happy all the time to make y'all happy. I don't live for myself. I live for to make the other people happy while I'm on earth. I guess that's the reason I'm living so long.
Is that a new brush?
No, don't use no new brush. The new brush ain't worth a dime.
Yeah.
You mess up on a new brush.
Why?
New brush you can't dab down like that. It's spread. You know that? Yeah, a new brush would spread. I got a little tail on that. Now you know what I do? I just hit on it. I got to put some in there now. Make it look like a tornado hit. Tornado hit that. Tornado hit this
Yeah.
here.
Right.
This black cloud. You know what? That's in our old cloud,
So if some of the people come by and look at the paintings and they say, "How'd this man become an artist?" What do you want me to tell them?
Tell them I was born an artist. I've been doing everything which you have to go to school for. I can do it. Beat you doing it. You come out and read that book and read these books and things. When you get that pencil, that paint in your hand, you better know what to do with that book to tell you. You better know what to do with it. I know what to do with it.
So a little bit of Hawkins talking about his painting. So the work that we're going to look at together is this one. It is the Statue of Liberty, and it was painted in 1986. This is a work in Intuit's permanent collection, and it recently traveled in this William Hawkins retrospective. So we're happy to have it back at the museum, and we have a really nice high quality image of the work, so I'll be able to get a little bit closer into the details of the painting. Before I talk any more about the details or go further into depth, what are you noticing? What are some of the details in this painting? What does this make you wonder? There's some sculptural elements. Definitely, there's the symbolism of patriotism. We have this flag right here, which also is a sculptural element. Perhaps a sense of national pride. I mean, whenever there is a flag, that's one of the meanings that we can make from the work. There are various different types of houses. In the foreground, we have these three smaller red roof houses that are, placed a little bit off kilter, and they all have different levels or different grounds that you have. And then you have this in the middle here, and then you have the cityscape back in the background. On the right side of the painting, there are these other elements, other symbols that recall other countries. So France for this airplane here, and then British with two SHs, which makes me think a little bit like it's like British, like there's like a kind of playful quality to the writing here. Now, this airplane right here, I had to look it up because it was too particular, and I was like, that must be an actual thing. And it was the Concorde Supersonic, which first flew in 1969. And if you'll notice here, it says France, and then it also, to recall something that someone else said, of these sort of patriotic colors. It just so happens that the colors of the French flag are also red, white, and blue. So there is a little bit of the play here. Now, let me ask you a question. When we have this British ship and we have this French Concorde supersonic, and then we have the Statue of Liberty, what is it making you think? Looking at this painting, I wasn't looking for those symbols, but knowing from the way that Hawkins worked and the type of research that he would do, he would have this suitcase that had all sorts of ephemera. It would have postcards, it would have clippings, it would have different photographs, and he would put a lot of these symbols together and use these inspirations from these images. And here he's deciding to put them all together. The other thing that I want to ask you is, what are some of the materials you're noticing here? And I can get into some of his materials, but I'd love for you to first kind of look at them. The Statue of Liberty. So we have we're thinking about perhaps it was wood. There are several found objects. Yeah, the one that really stands out to me here, especially because it's right at the center or the top center, is that, the hand that's holding the torch of the Statue of Liberty, or in this case, holding the flag of the Statue of Liberty, is this doll hand. So it's this doll hand that has been painted yellow, where Hawkins has recontextualized this toy as pretty central in his painting. In the beginning of his work, he would use house paints, and then as he continued to make paintings, he was a little bit more selective about the type of enamel paint he used. But the way that he uses it is very much that he would have this big board. It could be wood. He preferred the material masonite, which if you've done construction or remodeling, you might have run into masonite. It's this sort of compressed processed wood, and it's not porous the way that wood is. If you've ever tried to paint on wood, the paint really, really seeps through the surface of the wood. And Hawkins, in order to get this surface here that is so dense with paint, and for him to be able to show us these lines, and especially right here, let me zoom in here, you get the sense that he's like scraping the brush with the paint. In order to get that, he didn't want the paint to seep into the wood. He wanted the paint to stay at the surface. This is a big painting. I think it's like 74 inches by 60 something inches. He would have all these house paints or these enamel paints around him. And then he would begin by putting the enamel paints and forming the background, and he has been filmed and interviewed talking about how, he was gifted like 7 or 8 paintbrushes by his manager and people who knew that he was an artist. But he said, I don't need 7 or 8 paintbrushes, and I don't like to use new paintbrushes. And part of the reason was because he liked moving that paint around with these older brushes that would allow him, instead of making brush strokes, it would allow him to move and kind of manipulate the paint around the surface. And in fact, he would say that the paintings make themselves.